Hello, I'm Brad Kelly, and you're listening to Method and Madness. This is a show about books, the people who write them, and the labyrinth to be explored between the words.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his band. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had.
I am joined today by John Jay Stancliff, the author of the indie hit Fed book, and now Pierce, out August 11th from our friends over at Farthest Heaven. Before we get into it, just want to say I really recommend this book. It's kind of everything advertised on the tin. It's a book for the boys in some ways, but I think anybody is going to get something out of this book. It's got action and drama. It's got a lot of heart without being sappy and sentimental. It's got moments of beauty without being pretentious in any way. Just a really, really solid book that I think there's a little something for just about everybody in this thing. And I'm really excited to talk to Mr. Stancliff. John, how are you doing? Thanks for your time.
Doing great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Thanks to Bill at Farthest Heaven for setting it up.
Sure. Yeah. Bill's the man. He's making some things happen in sort of our corner of the indie literature realm. So I was excited to hear that you were working with him on this book, and they make beautiful books too. I have a handful of the physical copies now, and he really cares about what they look like and how they feel and everything else. So you're in good hands, I think.
Oh yeah, I'm ecstatic about the way the physical copy turned out. Yeah, he's great at design.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a great reader too. He's got exquisite taste all around. So yeah. Let's I could talk about the sort of intro of the book, but why don't you tell the audience what is Pierce? Give us sort of the elevator pitch of what this book is.
Yeah, so what I usually tell people is that Pierce it's a novel in 3 parts. Part 1 follows a sort of like novice carpenter at the age of 20 in Montana in the year 2001. And then part 2 jump cuts to Fallujah, Iraq. We're following the same carpenter, now a soldier. And then part 3 is present day, and it follows his son, who's the titular character of the novel, Pierce. And part 3 wraps the entire thing together, the why for the sort of perspective shift, and the events of part 1 and part 2 are folded into a neat bow. That was my goal.
Yeah, no, and it works. It absolutely works. And so it ends up being a book about fathers and sons in a lot of ways, and in a lot of beautiful and somewhat perhaps unexpected ways. I think people will find when they read it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, so there's two sort of, and you've kind of touched on them here. There's the Iraq stuff, and then there's the carpentry stuff. Both of these things are rendered really, really well. What is your level of personal experience, I guess, first with carpentry, and then have you served? Do you know people who served? Where does that if there is no experience there, I guess, where does that research come from?
Yeah, for carpentry, yes, I have a lot of experience. That's my job. And
Yeah,
I
I could
felt
tell.
like,
Yeah.
I felt like there's something really romantic about framing carpentry. It's the kind of job that on a really good day, when maybe it's 72 degrees, there's only a couple clouds in the sky and it's not too windy, and you're doing something fun like setting trusses, or just usually putting a roof together, to be honest, those are the best days. You really just, whatever you're getting paid on that particular job, you really feel like you're the luckiest guy in the world to be doing it. And I felt like there's something supernatural to that, to me, personally. And I wanted to try and express the draw and the romance of it. As for being a soldier, no, I've never served in the military. Um, and for part 2 in the book, I did quite a bit of research to um, figure out how to render it faithfully. And I'm really indebted to, I had a big draft, which was basically, it's completely based on my research of the movements of a particular unit in Fallujah. And um, and then I'm really thankful and blessed to have some close friends that were actually in the Marine Corps who could help me out with some of the facts of how units interact with each other, what kind of equipment they would or wouldn't have, what sounds really dumb, what doesn't sound dumb.
Right.
It's the part I'm the most paranoid about in the book because it's one of those things where like my you just know, like, if you're experienced with something, as soon as there's like a misstep in the author's voice, they're like, "Oh, okay, well."
Right.
And it's not like I'm trying to pretend I was there or anything, but I just want it to
Right.
feel, I want it to feel authentic and like um, exciting, and also like to capture the harrowing nature of what that particular battle was.
Sure. I think you pulled it off. I mean, I suspected that you had experience, honestly, from reading it. I'm probably not the person to put the stamp of approval. I haven't served either, so I can't say. But I was absolutely persuaded that this was realistic and sort of true to life, and the details all seemed right to me. So I think I'm sure you can get, just like any subject, I'm sure you could you put it in the hands of somebody out there who's a nitpicky and lived that experience. I'm sure they could find something, right? But I think
If
you did an
if
admirable job.
if one of the guys I work with, gets a hold of this book somehow and, notes that I had missed something in the steps in framing a house, I'll hear about it. So
Yeah, I know, I
I actually
know.
I
Yeah,
caught one of those mistakes on like my like third or fourth read through. I was like, wait, I'd like
really.
skipped the whole part of like framing
Right.
with the steps. I'll
That
go back
building's
and
gonna
have it.
yeah, that building's gonna fall down, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But really the stuff in part two, like just the utmost thanks to several individuals who I'll name, like John King Spezio and Tom Edgewon. Those are like the two biggest helps with that whole section. They read the entire thing. They gave me very detailed like line edit notes. This isn't
Cool.
right. This needs to change. Um, and then Mishma had on Twitter, if you know him, he was
Yeah,
also very helpful. And like
yeah.
he's kind of like a bigger account, or I don't know, has more of like a following, I guess, than I do. So I was really appreciative that he just read it. So
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, shout out to Tom. I know Tom. Yeah, he's a good dude.
yeah,
Um,
tons of good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I wanted to think about, I guess, if we could talk about, like, this is a question. So a lot of writers listen to this podcast, and readers too, obviously, but I like to spend a little bit of time and some find some stuff in here that could be valuable to a writer who might be listening. And one question I like to ask, it seems a little trite, but I actually have found it to be really enlightening in many cases. Excuse me. What was the first sort of germ of an idea that launched this book? Like, what first image or moment or whatever it was? What was the first thing that maybe you didn't even know it was going to make it into the book, but that ended up being in this book?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier. Um,
Yeah.
is in response to your question about like what books inspired you.
Yeah.
When I had read, I don't remember what year past the Passenger by Cormac McCarthy came out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 2022, 23.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And I read through that, and the parts that I liked the most in it were the parts where he's doing the underwater salvage diving, and is very technical. And I just remember reading it and like I didn't know exactly uh what he's talking about. There's a lot of technical. He used like a lot of technical jargon
Yeah.
to express what exactly the character is doing underwater. But I just remember being so entertained the entire time and kind of enthralled by the use of technical language in this sort of poetic way, and in a way that conveyed the romance and sort of story of manual labor. And granted, it's not like a huge part of the story, but for it was inspirational to me. And I'd made a couple of, maybe just one really like big one. I made a couple of forays into sort of technical, like trade oriented writing, and I wrote a story back. It must have been 2023, called, I think, just called The Carpenter, which is about a cabinet maker who, he basically really screws up a cabinet. He's on a deadline, he puts it off and screws it up. Um, and I wrote that, and it was really fun to write. And I thought it had some promise. Like a couple of a couple of people read it and said some really nice things to me about it. Um, so that sort of stuck with me for a little bit, and I sort of decided that if I was, for my next book, whenever I would start writing it, because at this time I had just self-published Fed book, and I was kind of exhausted with writing. I find this happens a lot. Like, well, not a lot. I've only released two novels, but the same thing has happened with the second one. I've just written a couple of short stories since finishing it, and I'm still like, when's that third spark gonna come?
Right.
Um, so the first germ of it was actually quite a long time ago, and it was really centered around the technicality of labor and expressing that in prose, and that was what I wanted to tackle with this one, which Fedbook is nothing like that. So people will find it very different. It was like the next rung on the ladder I felt like I wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. And this, I've even talked about this on this show before. I mean, there is something there is something in the sort of poetry of people actually doing something. Like in a film, it's really enjoyable. Like it's sort of another Cormac McCarthy reference, but in No Country for Old Men, some of my favorite parts of that film and the book too, but particularly the film, is when you're just watching Llewellyn Moss like prepare something, or when that moment when Anton Chigurh is like treating his own injury, like acquiring the materials to then treat his own injury. There's something about just watching a competent person do their thing that's I can watch that forever. Like
Oh yeah, of
you know what
course.
I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And in writing it's the same way. And I think there's a I think there is a tendency, and this isn't, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, but I think there is a tendency among the sort of literary type writers and writing to make it all very cerebral, and either cerebral and emotional, and sort of ends up kind of missing that whole quadrant of like a human being living in a space doing things, and like the sort of baked in metaphors that are there, just and the deeper symbolisms and the relationships that's depicted between that character and their world, just by showing them doing stuff basically. um and what's interesting is, you obviously in your line of work, you kind of caught the romance of it. I think for a lot of people, they might not realize that the thing that they spend their day doing might be actually really interesting to somebody who's not familiar with it. Like, I don't know anything about carpentry, to be honest with you. I mean, I've never really done it, other beyond like little DIY projects. And I was enthralled. I was like, yeah, I'll read about these dudes building the shop for page after page after page. This is great.
That's
um,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, job well done there. And I think like any writers listening, I mean, that might be something to consider. Like, what is the thing that in the physical world know how to do that might be kind of interesting to see play out? You might be, I think you might be surprised by how interesting it is. And I remember in The Passenger, that same scene you're talking about, that salvage diving thing, I was just enthralled by that. The note, and the thing that he had in there that was really resonant for me too is just the suggestion that there was because he's down in the dark, right? This just
Mhm.
suggestion that there's like something else out there, not in a like Lovecraftian way. It's just sort of very finely feathered into the scene, just a suggestion that there's something kind of looming out there while he's doing this like technical stuff. um and i think I think if a reader doesn't like, is sort of turned off by that stuff because maybe they don't know the jargon, I would really strongly recommend just letting it wash over you, kind of. Like, you don't have
Yeah,
to
that's how
know,
I feel too.
you don't have to know the name of every tool. Like, it doesn't really matter. You can just kind of like let it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, my pleasure reading is science fiction, and I mean, God knows science fiction writers are just throwing
Right.
terms at you all over the place that you don't know what they are. It never
Right.
like slows you down.
Yeah.
And yeah, the same I think with technical writing. Um, Even with not like literal like instruction manual technical writing, but
Sure.
just this kind of thing we're talking about where technical details sort of rendered in prose.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other authors that like do it really well, but yeah, there's
Mhm.
the passenger, which is not even a huge part of that book. It was just it just really stuck out to me, and I
Yeah.
really really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Growth of the
And quote,
Soil is a good one as well for
which
that.
one?
Growth
What
of the
story?
Soil by Knut Hamsun.
Oh yeah, I read that years ago. Yeah. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a deep cut, that one. Everybody talks about hunger, but I actually like that one better
Yeah,
personally.
it's so much better than but for reasons we just described. Like Growth of the
Yeah.
Soil is about a guy doing things in his his little farm, and then Hunger is about a guy lost in his head the whole time.
Right? Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I got thinking about this sort of subject we were talking about in relationship to your book, and thinking about, I don't want to get, there's all this discussion about like the literary men and books for men and blah 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 blah, right? I want to get caught up in like the culture war stuff of that, because it's been primarily because it's been talked to death, and it's like, why rehash it? However, I do think it's interesting to really, especially as writers, like you are a guy with a great book you just wrote. It's coming out August 11th. People go buy it. I've got a book out there. I'm working on another one. I'm sure you're going to be working on one soon. You're working on short stories. And we're thinking about, how to get a book out there that people want to read, probably primarily dudes. My next book's probably going to, the market's probably going to be, or the audience is going to be probably primarily dudes. Probably the same for you. I think it's worth thinking a little bit about like what makes a good book for guys. I think one thing is this technical detail sort of thing we're talking about. I refer to it as competence porn sometimes. Just like watching somebody good at something do something, is cool. But I think there's other things, and these other things you also do well. Another one of them is the social dynamic of men, just men, a group of men who are working on something or doing something together. So it's not necessarily just guys hanging out. It can be that too, but guys working on a carpentry job, guys on a fire team in Iraq, whatever it might be. And you do that really well also. Um what is, like, how do you get into that? What is the question I want to ask? Like, I guess the question is like, how do you do that? But what are you thinking about when you're setting up dialogue between some dudes and you're in a scene? What are the kinds of constraints you're putting on yourself? How do you know it's good? Anything along those lines.
Um, let's see. Well, I think it's drawing a distinction between guys hanging out and guys like working together to do something is a really important one to
Mhm.
draw here. Because yeah, guys that are working together to do something is a really funny one because it's especially when it's something like sort of dangerous like framing carpentry or something that's just like everything you do is a hassle.
Right.
Um, and some of that comes out in part one, like especially towards the end. Guys are complaining that nobody nobody bitches more than grown men doing construction. Nobody
Yes.
complains about how little someone else is doing than grown men that are working construction.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're all like really good friends. But I think maybe it has something to do that there's do with the fact that like that's your social group,
Mhm.
aside your family, when you come home, like that's who you're spending most of your day with, almost all of your waking life. And
Yeah.
that's really all there is to talk about on an 8-hour day. Can you believe so and so did this? Blah blah blah.
Right.
And then
Right.
when you're actually doing it, there's also the added aspect of competitiveness between people that are working on the same job. Like, and
Mhm.
not in a bad way, in a really good way. Like, you accomplish more when people are competitive, but it can also go too far, and it
Yeah.
can actually detract from the job. People's men's egos get in the way of them a lot.
Sure.
So I think like none of those exact conversations happen like in real life or anything. When I set out to like write, to start writing dialogue. I don't know exactly. Like the first line is always kind of like a magic trick. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but then you can sort of just spin it off from there. And I guess people said the same thing about Fed Book, which was also sort of a boys' book more than a men's book, which is about college dudes, having conversations, smoking weed together, and they said it
Right.
was a faithful representation of that. I think maybe it's my particular gift as an author to just be able to simulate these conversations in my head or something. I don't know, but I'm
Mhm.
I'm usually
Mhm.
able to just put one line after another. And I think a lot of times the conversation comes out way too fast. It gets to the quote unquote point way too early. And a lot of my dialogue is the stuff that I spend the most time stitching back up, as I go through it, adding things
Mhm.
and making it look nice and readable. And
Yeah.
I read it over and over and over again to make sure there's like a nice flow to it and it sounds natural. A lot of stuff in this book is not naturalistic, but the dialogue, for some reason, like it. I really like it to be naturalistic. I like it to feel real.
Yeah, and I think that pays off. I do think that reading it aloud, especially dialogue, I think is really valuable to read aloud. Even if you're not necessarily going for like a strict naturalist thing, just to like see how it sounds when a person says
Yeah.
it, kind of, right? Like I think that's really important. I know, I when I'm working on dialogue, especially if it's kind of tricky, I'll like pace around and sort of act it out, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
just like and sometimes acting it out a little bit helps you. And I'm no actor, I don't have any acting chops, but like sometimes kind of acting it out a little bit helps it kind of come out, if that makes sense. Cause you kind of like,
Oh, it totally does.
yeah, I kind of pretended to be this particular guy for a second. Like, I don't know. There's something about for me
Yeah.
moving
I, I,
around and really like
I
living
do
in it for a
this.
second. Yeah.
I do this and look down at my keyboard and just like talk to myself.
Yep.
And then, oh, that's it. That one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go. Yeah, 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 for sure. No, I love the thing you said about nobody bitches more than construction guys. And so people who listen to this show will already know that I'm a engineer, pretty low ranking engineer, but I'm out on construction sites a lot. So I'm like around construction guys, even though I'm not really doing it. And I've been out on projects where I'm full time out there for months and months and months. And so I get to know these guys pretty well. And I'm mostly doing like inspection, but like I think on long-term projects, how to be a good inspector is actually to get kind of collegial with everybody. Because then then people hide stuff from you less and whatever. Anyway, that's
Yeah, I
a
was gonna
totally
I was
different
gonna
topic.
say
Yeah.
being an engineer on the site, it's got to be a little bit tough because
Well, they
it's
hate you.
yeah, exactly.
They
Yes.
hate you off the bat. So you're trying to like combat that a little bit and you got to get them to kind of like you a little bit. And I often genuinely end up liking them, right? Um
Mhm.
but yeah, the thing you're saying, I didn't realize before I ever got out there, I kind of assumed these guys were going to be all like stoic sort of figures. And there is a lot of bitching and a lot of like talking shit and a lot of like gossip fundamentally.
Yeah.
It can be a pretty fun if you get like a cool, fun crew. It's hilarious. Yeah. So, so you captured some of that stuff very well. And then I think that probably ports over to like being on a in a group in the military. I'm sure it's similar in some ways. The danger is a lot higher for sure, but maybe in some moments it's not. There's a lot of, I think, in the military there's a lot of waiting for something to happen. It seems to be like the prime where you primarily spend your time is kind of waiting for things. But similar kind of context, right? Guys together, guys kind of forced together. They're not hanging out because they called each other up and were like, let's hang out. They sort of have to
Yeah.
be there with each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, yeah. There's another thing. So, thinking about this, what adds to a good book for men, talking about the sort of technical details of physically working in the world or doing something in the world, I think is cool. And then this male social dynamics, which you've done really well, are important. And then another thing that I think, which is in your book, very well done, and is something I think that in books that appeal to men is frequently present, is something to do with like the conflict of virtue, the difficulty of maintaining virtue. It's like it's easy for us to sit here and say like this is the right thing to do and this is what you shouldn't do. Some of my favorite books are when like that becomes unclear, or it becomes incredibly difficult to do the virtuous thing, or to do the virtuous thing you have to like sacrifice yourself or some aspect of yourself. And I think there is this going on in your book, and I guess I just wanted to that's more of a selling point, I suppose, than a question. I just thought I thought that was really well done. These, like, some of your characters make decisions that we can sit here and say that wasn't the right thing to do, but the way you've conveyed it is like, yeah, but I get it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I get why you did it. I get why you did it, man, and you shouldn't have, but I get it. Because
Yeah.
yeah, because it's really easy to sit here and just pretend like, oh, everybody just do the right thing all the time, right? Just be good and never lie, never do this, never do that. And when you actually get out there in life, it's not always so easy. And I think most guys are all the time trying to do the right thing. It's just not always that easy. And I think we in fiction like to see that sort of played with and carried out and like shown to us somehow, so we can feel some I feel that sort of literary magic. So anyway, that's not really so much a question, it's just a kind of another aspect in which I want to recommend your book.
Yeah,
um
that was very deliberate.
yeah.
I think one of the things I wanted to show, obviously my sort of elevator pitch, it goes from 2001 to the present day. Most of it is in 2001 to 2004, but
Mhm.
one of the big things I wanted to show is basically the difference in what is shown, um, to well, I wanted to sort of paint this picture of the world as I've understood it, I should say, because I'm just a fiction writer.
Mhm.
I'm not I'm not writing an essay here.
Right.
But I wanted to show a guy that has the examples in front of him and he knows what's right and wrong. And then I wanted to show sort of a wild man who, and I'm not going to explain like how he gets to that point, but like show the difference between um not having an example and having the examples, knowing what's right and wrong from people in your life very clearly, and then
Mhm.
searching for that and not having it and making bad decisions because of it.
Mhm.
um but ultimately, through, I don't want to spoil anything, but
Yeah.
ultimately, like, heroism is still possible. And
Yes.
heroism in a very low, not in like a Arthurian sense, heroism in a very low, like, modern sense
Mhm.
is still possible.
Yeah.
But a sense that's equally potentially salvific, I guess would be the right
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And that's, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we're, I mean, that's absolutely true about life. I think, like, for most of us, the acts of heroism we're going to do are going to be so small, they're not really noticeable except to us and maybe a few people around us, you know. It's little stuff oftentimes, but it's trying to carry some level of virtue into kind of the everyday, you know,
Mhm.
like yeah, yeah. And you know, this book is a little bit, you know, it manages, because it's this intergenerational thing, we get a little bit bigger of a scope than just maybe the everyday, but yeah, it felt like I guess kind of just tacking back to my point, like I understood the bad decisions that were made by some of the characters. I was sort of nodding my head and I was like, yeah, that's I I might do that too if I were in that exact situation. I'd like to say that I wouldn't, but I don't know, you know. I know every decision I've made in my life hasn't been virtuous, you know. I hope that my proportions gotten better over time, but yeah. Yes, it's just really really solid. Um I want to read, if you don't mind, would you mind me reading like two small paragraphs? And then I kind of want to talk about something that's, I don't know if it's quite related to what we were just talking about, but it's something that I think is very interesting about this book.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Go ahead.
it's in the earlier part, so it doesn't really give anything away, but Collier, who is our carpenter in the beginning in part one, and he is our the leader of our fire team in part two. He's the father of Pierce. He's on a group of guys. They're doing carpentry, and he gets into it with an older dude, old Bob, and there's a bit of a pissing match. And Collier essentially like makes a wager that basically like, I can outroof you, old man. And this is towards the end of it, where I just thought it was a beautiful couple paragraphs, and I want to talk about it a little bit. So, quote, but Collier felt no pleasure watching his defeated coworker try in vain to keep his impossible pace. He would not press old Bob for a new truck. That was, by the way, the wager he made. Whoever lost would buy the winner a new truck. He saw a weathered ape of a man attempting in vain to retain a vigor which had disappeared from him and from the world, and a younger man helping him out of pity and out of respect for hierarchies of skill and seniority. That would be the only respect given old Bob. He was old. They owed it to him to entertain his delusions and help him. Collier had spent $50 of his own money on those the nails old Bob was using, but that was as far as it went, as far as it would ever go, because Collier and Stephen also had a responsibility to disabuse the old of the world. That was the young man's struggle. That was the struggle for which the world had personally endowed them with youth. Beyond the green alfalfa fields, where the pivots turned slowly and sprayed gallons and gallons of water, there were smaller fields and ditches, unmaintained clearings and draws, too rocky or uneven to farm, home only to deer hoping to escape the heat, and young pheasants. In those ditches and draws, Collier could see patches of yellow where the heat had withered the grass. So I wanted to read that for a couple of reasons. One, I just really, really liked it. Another is I was interested in this thing, this notion of disabusing the old of the world, and this tension between, you know, this tension between trying to push the old timers out to make room for us, and also trying to let them have their dignity in some way, right? Partially because I hope when I'm 60, somebody lets me have my dignity, you know, when I'm outdated and I don't know how to fucking use my gadgets or whatever. Like, I hope somebody like treats me with a little bit of respect, you know, and isn't like understands I'm old and out of it, and they just don't think I'm stupid, right? Um, but I got thinking about this, how true this kind of is in so many other fields, and how, you know, I think you're a little bit younger than I am, so maybe I'm the old man in between the two of us. But just, you know, I, I don't maybe trying to think about how to phrase this as a question, but it's like, How do you see, first of all, I guess, do you see some old timers in your line of work that are still out there swinging a hammer, or is it all young guys at this point? Younger guys, anyway.
I my crew is pretty young
Yeah.
currently, but I've worked around. Like there's a specific guy that I worked around that old Bob came from.
Okay. Yeah.
He literally looked. You've probably seen that picture of the bald chimpanzee once upon a time on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what he
Yeah.
looked like,
Yeah.
and he's swinging his like 3 pound hammers, hammering stakes in like two goes. He was frightening. He
Right.
was actually really nice, but you could you could see and I would he was nice to us. I'm not a concrete finisher, but
Okay.
he worked for a concrete company, and I would hear how he would talk to his apprentices and stuff, and it was a kind of like mix between sort of paternal, and then really harsh at other times, and like acting as if he's still in his 20s. And part of
Right.
it is you kind of wonder like what a guy is still doing labor at that age, and you have to assume maybe they kind of love it or something, or they've just made so many bad decisions, like nobody will ever give them leadership,
Right.
even though they're good at what they do and they can teach
Right.
other people. It's kind of a that's sort of a weird dynamic in itself. I mean, I really, I genuinely pray that I'm not in that position when I'm older.
Right. Yeah. I
It's
mean,
horrible.
as you get to a certain age, you should be running a crew, and then as you get to a certain age beyond that, you shouldn't be. Yeah, yeah. There is
Yeah.
a sort of hierarchy, right? You make progression over time, and yeah, yeah. It, it's tricky though, because it's like, obviously not everybody who goes into, there's always going to be people who are at the bottom, they're at the bottom of the totem pole, right? And there
Mhm.
is like what happens to those guys over time, there's
Yeah.
it's a tough, it's
Some people
tough.
really don't like the responsibility of managing a job, which I don't blame them at all for
Yeah.
that either. But
Yeah.
me personally, at that point, like if I realized I didn't want to do that, I would start thinking about how my joints feel every night and look for a different career.
Right, 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 right.
But
Well,
that
yeah,
option
but
isn't available to a lot of
it's
people.
not
Yeah.
available. I mean, you're a smart dude, right? So like, and this isn't trying to paint too broad of a brush about anybody, but like, there's some dudes, some guys in that world that they don't really maybe think more than a few months ahead necessarily.
Mhm.
And so I'm always kind of curious, like, what what happens to the lowest man on the totem pole in a crew after like 10, 20 years. It's not promising, I guess. um and yet the world's still like, I don't know, we still have there still has to be, I guess, room for them in some way, in the world some way.
Yeah, and
So
they're still useful. Like
hmm
end of the day, like they had this sort of awkward problem they had to solve between the two of them, but the roof got done.
yeah, no,
Which
that
is
did it did get
probably
done.
faster
Yeah,
than usual.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And in your story, old Bob, he is competent. Like like, he's not he doesn't need to be pushed out to the pasture yet. He's just an
right.
older guy, and he can't move quite as quick, and he can kind of compensate for that in other ways. Yeah, I just
Mhm.
I just thought that whole dynamic was really cool. I just really appreciated that part of the book. Um, I guess I wanted to talk a little bit. I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but
You're
um,
good.
the warfare stuff. Um, I was kind of curious. What are some books? I know you said you did a lot of research. Are there, and maybe this, I'm going to ask you towards the end of this conversation about the John Jay Stancliff personal canon. So maybe the question I'm going to ask you and that question share some books. What are some good books, fiction or nonfiction, about warfare? Like, let's say I want to write a book like Pierce. Where would you point me?
Um, my favorite fictional book about war is The Centurions by Jean Lardigue, which is about I think it's the people who know more about this conflict than me are gonna be mad. I don't remember. I think it's the creation of the first French paratrooper unit
Oh.
after the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam, Indochina.
Hmm. Hmm.
Basically, these guys, they fight at Dien Bien Phu. It's obviously a terrible loss for the French. They get captured by communists, and then they go back to France, and they're reassembled by, after they're let go, they're released by the Vietnamese. They go back to France, and then they reassemble all the guys, and then they go and fight counterinsurgency. And I want to say it's Algeria. I'm pretty positive it's Algeria.
Huh.
Obviously, that's a pretty heavily publicized like anti-colonial event, and this is firmly from the colonial side that you're reading the book.
Mhm.
And it's interesting from that side, I think, because it's not really ideological for the men. John Lardique follows like six of them very closely. One of the guys was he was high up in Vichy. He was tortured after the war was over. He was able to still get in the armed forces. One of the guys, he lived in Western France. Sorry, the main officer that sets up the paratrooper unit. He's like, I think he's part Basque.
Hmm.
And he would smuggle stuff when he was a child between Spain and France, and he just loves adventure, and he loves struggle. And then some guys that are sort of like foppish dandies that just, they like the sensation of war and
Mhm.
are really good at it. But there's a lot of really thrilling combat scenes in there. Not too much though. I think that's kind of the key for me with with fiction specifically is like nobody's favorite part of any novel is necessarily like the combat sequences because
Right.
I think they're really difficult to do well, and they definitely it's like in a movie too.
Mm.
If it goes on for more than 10 or 15 minutes, it starts to really drag, and it's kind of like hard to follow. You're really
Yeah.
more invested in the characters
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah. No,
I
that's
tried to do
that's
that with
definitely true.
this. There's less combat than there is sitting around and kind of just walking around.
Mhm.
Um, But then, yeah, besides that, I mean, honestly, nothing comes too much to mind. I read a couple, like, I read Redeployment, I think it's called Redeployment by Phil Clay,
Mhm.
which is like a Pulitzer winning. I think I'm butchering all the awards and all the specific names.
That's okay.
Anyway, it won an award in like 2008 or 2009, and it was about some guys in the Marines. It's a collection of short stories about different guys in different aspects of the Marines. So it's
Mm.
you get a story from an officer's point of view. You get some enlisted guys. You get guys that were like what Matthew Modine does in Full Metal Jacket, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it's all set in Iraq, and that was really good. There's not a lot of combat in it. Um, yeah, not really a lot at all. Just kind of thinking of things that are coming to my head right
Sure.
now. Really most of what I've consumed, like as far as war material is really nonfiction, and a lot of stuff from not there's really not that much in the way of like God bless the people that are writing memoirs about the global war on terror, but
Mhm.
they're not super useful for what I was trying to convey. Like
Right.
there there's some guys that did some really heroic things in the global war on terror, and but the problem is most of those books they're focused around the actions of one really extraordinary person in a very extraordinary event, um, and you don't really get the sense of the tactical situation so much other than I mean, it feels very Hollywood, and I think a lot of them are ghost written with that in mind. They're mass market titles.
Right.
um, so a lot of the stuff that I've written is like historical monographs. uh, There's a really good one called "The Forgotten Soldier" by Guy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Guy
Yeah.
Sire,
Okay.
Sager. I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
He was a
Yeah.
guy that he fought in the Eastern Front, um, for the Third Reich when he was way too young to be doing so. It's very harrowing.
Mm.
Um, just very straightforward, matter of fact descriptions of coming under fire, the what it feels like to come out, you know, onto this plane and see before you like the rolling grass and more husks of tanks. He specifically said, I saw more molten down and like destroyed tanks than I thought could possibly even exist on the earth, like
Wow.
and just in one area. Um
Yeah.
Stuff like that, just very very haunting. While I was writing Pierce, I read something, I read a book about Guadalcanal, which was really cool. It, it was a secondary source, but it pulled a lot from firsthand accounts of what it was like to
Mm.
fight there. And one of the better ways, actually, if you're interested in researching global war on terror, and to anybody who's listening, if someone's listening and is interested, there are so many really great YouTube videos and
Yeah.
interviews now, um, about that. That's probably the primary way that people will study it, because not a lot has been. Frankly, there's not a ton that's been written, with the sort of unadulterated rigor that just like talking in an interview style to someone who's been there,
Right.
in that way that they're willing to share. So that stuff's really valuable. I'm also sort of a I'm losing my voice a little bit. I'm sort of a victim of the internet, in that, from like, 13 or 14, saw combat footage on the internet, like the Syrian civil war was going off, and you couldn't really avoid
Yeah.
looking at it. And I I actually I wanted to see what that was like. I
Mhm.
think it's kind of a boyish curiosity. I always played war growing up.
Mhm.
I wanted to see what is it like actually like being shot at and like shooting at other people. Like what are they doing? And it turns out it's just a bunch of guys like running around all over the place. At least in those videos, I'm sure we're like
Yeah.
more trained units. It's a little bit different, but it conveys something. I'm not proud of it. I'll put it that way. It's just
Yeah.
that's one way that I've
Yeah.
I haven't researched, but I've just been exposed to it.
Sure. No, I mean, I totally get that. I had and that's all super interesting, and it reminds me of how I go about researching things now. YouTube is this incredible source for like researching anything, and I know is like the part of me that wants to be academically rigorous like thinks don't start there, but honestly, most subjects, that's probably at least the place to start. Yeah, depending on, I guess, on the subject. So that totally makes sense to me. But I was like you, man. I mean, so my in terms of like watching footage, you know, I grew up with my dad is a combat veteran in Vietnam, and didn't really talk about it much. Stories popped out here and there, like over the years, so I gone down so many rabbit holes of like watching stuff, mostly just like trying to figure out what the hell he went through, you know?
Yeah.
And then more generally, like, well, what were we even doing over there? Like, and then trying to get obviously like historical context and all of that too. So yeah, I understand what you're saying about the YouTube stuff, and then also like a little bit of the challenge of like finding the material that's actually getting you to what you want to know is
Yeah.
sometimes difficult. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like I was like seeking, I did seek out like one thing that's really, really cool. And I would actually, there's nothing too crazy on YouTube. I would encourage people
Mm.
to look this up, is you can basically put in any, like I literally put in like 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines Kilo Company, which
Mhm.
is that's the unit in the book. I put that into YouTube, and there's like somebody in that company, some staff sergeant made like a YouTube video set to like corn or something.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and it's like a collage of pictures. There's some videos. And they're really cool. You can gain a lot of. I I've never been to Iraq. I would literally just watch these videos and like okay, that's what the street looked like. It really is
Right,
like just kind of yellow in the sky.
right.
Like I'm just gonna. I'm gonna talk about that.
Yeah,
There everything's exploded. Like
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah,
That's very
and
real.
doing that kind of thing too can like prevent you from getting to because yeah, like you said, like the guy, he's putting corn over it, right? Which like obviously that's what he would do, right? Like that makes perfect sense to me, but I feel like if you tried to like come up with the stuff in a vacuum, it's probably might not make that connection, right? Because that's like
Well, yeah.
that's a real detail. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, and when he was making this video, it was probably being shown to people he was moving into the unit. Like, this is what
Yep.
we're gonna go do. It's sick. It's
Yeah, it's
awesome.
like right. It's like an orientation thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that
Ver-
that going back to the watching combat footage thing, like you grow up as a boy, at least I did, like that's what I was reading about. I
Yeah.
had, the kids encyclopedia, illustrated encyclopedia on World War II. I
Mhm.
think from Usborne, which is still a great children's publishing house. But they they had all these cool pictures of tanks and guys with guns and all in their camo. I dressed up as these guys on like Halloween when I was younger. Like it kind of
Yeah.
it all sort of like tracks through. Like when you're like 14 or 15 and you're in an age where like this stuff is being uploaded, like you're like, I just want to see what a gunfight is actually like. It turns out it's really scary and chaotic. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was the
Loud
biggest
and
thing I think to convey.
confusing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you don't really know what happened until it's over, kind of. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I got a couple other questions for you. One is I want to ask you about soccer because soccer features in this book, not in a huge way, but it's definitely there. And I think I caught wind that you were closely watching the World Cup. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
I
okay.
was.
Um, Tell me a little bit about like your experience with soccer and like what's awesome about soccer.
um I think, well, I played soccer my entire life, including into adulthood. I I suffered a pretty bad knee injury playing it, like I think it'd be a year and a half ago now, unfortunately. Um, I still love to watch it, and hopefully I'll be able to play again. Um, but I think what's awesome about it is it's a very tactical sport. You're coordinating with like on an outdoor, you're coordinating with 10 other people, but it's also fundamentally chaotic, and your fortune can change at any time. I think it gives it really high highs and like the lowest lows. It's probably the most toxic of any major team sport for that reason. It's it's really hard not to I played most recently in an adult league where I live, and all of us have day jobs, but the strain and the intensity of it and the um it feels extremely high stakes, because one goal, and this is levied as a criticism against soccer, but
Mhm.
people say like one goal in soccer is worth like 45 points in basketball or something like
Sure.
that. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much true.
Yeah.
One bad decision, you like instead of going home happy that night, you would go home like thinking about everything you did wrong in the game. And then you go to work because you're a grown man and
Right.
that's not your job. But
Right.
I don't know. I think what makes it good is kind of that sort of mechanic of it.
Yeah.
Just the aspect. It's like team team poker or something. I don't know. You're all
Yeah.
everything can turn at a moment. Or team
That's
roulette maybe would be
y- yeah,
a better
that's an
example.
interesting way to yeah, because I've heard the criticisms that it's low scoring. I played when I was a kid, I played like AYSO when I was a kid up until I don't know, I think I played up until I was in like seventh grade and I loved it. I had fun. Um But yeah, I always kind of scoffed at the criticism that it's kind of boring because it's low scoring. But I never thought about what you're saying in that kind of detail. You're right from a player's standpoint, and if you're really engaged as a fan watching, yeah, there is this thing where like one point means a lot. So yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. I
Yeah, I think it makes it better, but
yeah.
other people. Other people don't
Well,
think so.
there is a thing. I don't really follow basketball much, but there is like a thing where they're just like, man, they're just scoring constantly, and there does seem to be a in basketball, you know, in you know, as opposed to soccer, there is this thing where like sometimes it seems like um the defensively they're sort of not trying that hard. Like the whole point of the game is to just outscore each other, and then every once in a while somebody does something defensive. But it doesn't seem like nobody's like really laying it out on the line defensively to like prevent people from scoring. It's just like we'll score 100, they'll score 106 or something. It's like it's odd that way, and I don't find it particularly engaging. But are you an offensive guy or a defensive guy?
I played defense.
Yeah.
That's how I hurt myself.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
A heroic defensive maneuver. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
exploded my knee. Um,
Right on. Right on. Oh, sorry
yeah,
to hear
I
that.
think.
That sucks.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
good. I'm healed now, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, I think the reason I included it in Pierce was partially because, at least the state of soccer in America today, it is kind of an outside. I don't want to say outsider sport. It's just not a very like popular one,
Mhm.
and there's certain associations with playing soccer that I think contribute to an image of maybe alienation from the wider culture that I wanted to sort of cultivate with that character, and particularly from his family, obviously, um,
Right. Right.
because his dad and his grandfather play football,
Right.
um,
Right.
and so
Well,
it sort of represents a rift in that way.
yeah, that was the choice in my world was soccer or football. That was like, which one of those two are you gonna play?
Yeah,
And
there's a
yeah,
lot of people.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I also
Interesting.
think it was a like I know I wanted Pierce to as a character to have some of that athleticism and strength that his father did. I felt like a good way to convey that was write a little scene
Yeah,
demonstrating the poise in a soccer game. Um,
sure.
is it yeah, it's that's another thing I like. Another reason I like soccer. I feel like it's one of the you don't have to be a genetic anomaly to succeed in soccer, unlike other sports. It requires something a little different, like poise, but you also need to be explosive,
Mhm.
but you need to also have endurance. It requires more of a well-rounded athletic ability and physiology, which I think is better for day-to-day life. I think soccer players in general are just like more coordinated. You can like see it on them
Yeah, that's
than other
probably
people. But
that's
that's my
probably true.
polemic.
Yeah, no, that's probably true because in football, every position is like a tool. Like the best
A
player
body
at that
type.
position is like a body type for that position for sure.
Yeah.
And you can like tell by looking at somebody what position they would play on a football team, right? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that is, but yeah, soccer. That's not that way really, as far as I can tell. Anyway.
Yeah. Goalies are in the pros, goalies are really tall, and
Yeah.
center defenders are usually taller than everybody else. But for example, you got the whole
Yeah.
spectrum. Strikers are you can be like Erling Holland, or you can be like Messi,
Hmm.
playing offense. One guy's 5'6", the other guy's 6'2". Like,
Right. 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 Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting. Um, I want to. I got a couple more questions for you. One is, and I sort of meant to ask you this question earlier, so you might have kind of answered it, but I think I think it's an important question. What did you learn about writing from writing Pierce that you think you'll kind of take with you into ensuing projects?
I think the single biggest thing is that the story starts when you begin to write it. It doesn't like there is an element of the flash of lightning, um, but there's also an element of I want to write novels. I better just start writing a book. And even if it's like the vaguest notion, you could just start out by writing it and then come away with a novel. that you feel really passionately about and you care about and love. Even though it didn't necessarily like my first book was kind of is I was extremely I felt extremely inspired. I was like, this is the best idea ever. I have to write it. With this book, I didn't know when I was going to start my second novel, when it was what it was going to be about, and I just started writing something based off of a sort of writing exercise that I had done that I kind of liked, and I just gave some backstory to one of the characters in it, and it turned essentially into the prologue of the novel.
Mm.
Um, and then from there, I was sort of confused about where it would go for a while. But the thing is when you just begin, um, everything in your life, your perspective, the books you pick up and read, uh, they mold they mold around the novel you're writing, and suddenly the story you really wanted to tell but weren't sure who even the character would be or where it would start, kind of just it just it appears at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. I love that. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna ask you my last question here. This is for the John Jay Stancliff personal canon. This is a couple of three books that are important to you that maybe are a little bit less discussed, or maybe you consider them underrated even. Um,
um well, let's see. I'll go with ones that I were influential when I was reading Pierce.
yeah.
It's definitely not underrated in the literary world at large, but I feel like a lot of people in our circles kind of write it off because it sounds annoying. It does sound annoying, but My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard is genuinely a masterwork. Um, it's really special. It taught me a lot about it taught me a lot about how simply you could portray people without taking away from their character. Um, and I'm not gonna say it taught me a lot about like all the beautiful moments in everyday events, because that's actually not what the book's about at all.
Right.
That's one thing I
Sure.
want to convey to people is it's he does describe like the quotidian, um, but that's not the point of the book. The book is actually extremely like ironic and self-righteous in a super funny way. I mean, he named it like My Struggle. That should give you a hint
Right.
of what the tone of the book is like. But it's also just kind of how to write. Maybe not how to write. I don't know if I've achieved it, but the aesthetic value of writing something that can sort of just be enjoyed as you're reading it. How to like something really cozy. I think
Mm,
coziness is something that comes to mind when I think of those books.
yeah.
Um, More so than any particular scene. But that was really influential to me. Um,
Mm,
Another one, and this was sort of a linchpin in Pierce. It helped me figure out how I was going to structure the novel. It's sort of the bones, so to speak, but it's like it. Pierce is extremely loosely based. The structure is on Parsifal by Wolfram von Eschenbach,
mm,
which I believe was written in the 13th century. It's a chivalric romance about Parsifal, and I would encourage people to read that as well.
yeah.
One thing that's really great about reading sort of alien, extremely old works like that is the exposure to, first of all, completely different ways of writing that break all
Right.
of the contemporary rules, completely different structures and storytelling that also break all the rules, but are still satisfying. Even if they do take a while to get there. Like the book is dull in parts, um, but it's also
Yeah.
extraordinarily entertaining once you acclimatize yourself to it. Uh, and there's some amazing use of metaphor uh, in the book. I'll tell you one because it just always sticks with me. It's like maybe one of the best metaphors I've ever heard. Partially because it's hyperbolic in a way I've never seen, and but also extremely pointed. Um, Parzival is walking through a a glade that has just been snowed across, and he's he's feeling really sorrowful because he just left this castle that had a beautiful maiden in it, and he's sad that he has to do this Grail quest. He doesn't know if he should or not. He feels like he should go back to her, but he's like forced to participate in this what they would consider a sacrificial act. Of course, he'll gain a lot of fame if he does find
Mhm.
it. If he does, yeah, go to the Fisher King and all that. But anyway, he's walking through this snowy glade, and a goose flies overhead, and then a moment later, a falcon flies overhead, and it tears out the goose's neck, like in midair, instantly kills the
Whoa.
goose, and the blood from the goose's neck splatters all across the snow, and he like looks down from his horse at it, and he says that the blending of the blood, the goose's blood and the snow, they had this pink color that reminded him of the blush of the lady's cheeks.
Oh my God.
And
That's intense.
he's just locked in a trance, like staring at it for a while
Whoa.
until
Whoa.
this traveling knight
Yeah.
comes and tries to
Yeah.
fight. But anyway, I
Right.
that's
That
always
sounds
stuck with me.
badass. That sounds awesome. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And then there's another one where just a mere description of grief. It must have been a very direct translation. When um, one of the women in the book, her husband, who's a knight, dies in combat, and the Wolfram von Eschenbach describes her grief as um, she saw the sun as in a mist for years, and I was like just kind of taken aback by that.
Mhm.
It it's not it's cool because it's sort of ambiguous. Like the sky seemed cloudy, or her eyes were just had tears in them all the time since then. It just always really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Like metaphors don't usually stick with me, but I think the specificness of the translation really helped.
Hmm.
It was, yeah, I just thought that was beautiful. So
Got it.
that's my personal. That's part of the Pierce canon at least.
Wow.
Um, Growth of the Soil by Knut Hamsun, we discussed that earlier, is really great. I feel like that's almost it's definitely a novel that only an older man could write.
Yes.
And you have to sort of let it be at that. I could never write something like that, but I not yet anyway. I'm it's so enjoyable to read. I like the structure of it because it almost has and it almost has this sort of what would you call it? Like power scaling? Is that the sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
nomenclature for it?
I think so. Yeah.
You watch this guy start from nothing and become like a really respected member of his community, just a baller farm, got a
Yeah.
huge tool collection.
Yeah.
He's able to he starts a sawmill and he starts making even more money. He finds out there's a valuable mineral claim on his property. It's it's really great. Not just for those reasons, but
Right.
it's an extremely enjoyable book. The prose is amazing. Knut Hamsun's really an underrated master. Um,
Oh yeah.
and if all you've read by him is Hunger, you got to read more. Hunger, I wouldn't even rank Hunger with like he has a book called Victoria, which is more of a cerebral. I'm a sad guy in my head all the time kind of book, and that
Mhm.
one's better than Hunger, I would say.
Yeah, I might have to get to that because I liked Hunger, but I liked Growth of the Soil even more for sure.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful. I
Yeah.
think I would like to complete his works at some point. And then
Interesting
I guess
indeed.
for the third book, I read this one is also like well known and it's not even underrated. But For Whom the Bell Tolls was kind of influential. I guess it's sort of the
Beautiful.
writing, the writing style. Just the one of the biggest things that's for me as a writer is I really want a book to be entertaining and good. I don't want it to
Yes.
be I don't want it to have this, you know. good prose, but that's all you can write home about. I want people to, they're going to invest time into reading it. I want them to be really entertained. I just realized I'm losing so much light right now. There
There you
we
go.
go.
Yeah, it was
I,
it
I
was
don't.
getting moody in here. That's all right.
I want people to. I want people to. They're gonna buy the book. I want them to enjoy the 15 or 20 hours or however long it takes them
Yeah.
to read the book. I want them to be entertained the entire time. I think at the end of the day, we're still doing this for entertainment. It's not for I don't know what the opposite would be, to be honest. I
Right.
have no
Yeah.
other I
Yeah.
have no other theory of literature other than entertainment. I think
No,
there's I think there's worse kinds of entertainment than others for sure. But
100% with you. At some point I decided that like the basic metric of whether the thing I'm writing is good is whether people want to turn to the next page. And so it's like, just, as long as I get them doing that, then you can do whatever the hell you want. You want to get philosophical, do that. You want to get sentimental, do that. You want it to be, blood and guts, do that. But as long as it's like people are entertained, right? They want to keep going, then you're doing the thing. And Pierce is definitely doing that. So, August 11th, which if you're listening to this on the free side, is today or it already happened. So go out, get Pierce from Farthest Heaven, support Mr. Stancliff, support Farthest Heaven. They're doing incredible stuff. And I guess anything else, John? Thank you for joining me.
yeah, thank you again so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a Substack, johnjaystancliff.substack.com. If you're interested, if you like my novels, if you like Pierce, I've got some short stories on there you'll probably like. Short stories are more of a niche thing these days, so
Yeah.
you're probably really dedicated if you seek that out. But it's there.
Check them out.
And then I guess the other thing, it'll probably be announced by this point, but we're going to be doing a reading uh, in DC on September 26th
Oh, cool.
at 7:30 at Butterworth. So be there if you're in the area. We'd love to see you
Awesome.
and come hang out.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, I wish I could make it. I don't know. I'll have to check my calendar. I definitely want to make it to one of these Farthest Heaven readings at some point. So,
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah. Well, folks. That's it for this one. Coming up soon, I've got the Madness episode on House of Leaves. I've got the Getting Lit fellas are coming on to talk If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, and what's coming up after that? Oh, the great David Leo Rice is returning to talk about Meditations in Green, which is a sleeper masterpiece about the war in Vietnam. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you on the next one.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his bad. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had. He went down to the dope shop one Saturday night. He knew the lights would all be burning bright. Well, I guess he smoked a dozen pills or more. When he woke up, he was on a foreign shore. Queen of Sheba was the first he met. She called him lovey-dovey and honey pet. She gave him a great big automobile with a diamond headlight and a golden wheel. Down in Honolulu, Willie fell in a trance, seeing the dusky beauties do the hula dance. His sweetie got in jail and Willie sure did shout when he got the news that she had wiggled out. He landed with a splash in the river Nile, riding on a sea-going crocodile. He winked at Cleopatra, she said, ain't he a sight? He said, how about a date for next Saturday night? He had had 1,000,000 cattle and he had 1,000,000 sheep. Had 1,000,000 vessels on the ocean deep. Had $1,000,000 all in nickels and dimes. Well, he knew because he counted it 1,000 times. He landed in New York one evening late. He asked his sugar for an after date. Started to kiss her and she started to pout when bang, bang, and the door gave